They conversed about everything and nothing during the drive. The surprisingly light traffic on I-95, the neighbor's son caught trespassing in a backyard pool, her persistent knee aches despite her refusal to see a doctor. The estate appeared just as Gloria was recounting her church's cancelled bingo night. She paused mid-sentence. "You didn't mention it was this kind of place," she remarked. Latrice offered a brief chuckle, her gaze fixed on the lengthy driveway flanked by manicured hedges and pristine white hydrangeas. "I didn't think it mattered." The residence was immense yet understated, brick and ivy with towering windows and substantial white columns. It exuded an aura where whispers replaced conversations, where one instinctively double-wiped their shoes, even if already clean. Inside, a faint scent of lemon polish and aged paper lingered, the kind of cleanliness achieved by unseen hands. Gloria stood quietly as Latrice bustled, outlining the house rules. No footwear on the Persian rug, avoid touching the antique mirror in the hall, and no inquiries about the locked room upstairs. "He's not here currently," Latrice added, "but if he arrives, just be polite, say hello. Don't worry, he keeps to himself." Gloria nodded. "Politeness has never been my issue." She placed her bag by the kitchen door and drifted into the sunroom, drawn by the sunlight illuminating the tiled floor. There she saw it, the chessboard. Crafted from dark walnut and ivory-hued squares, its intricately carved pieces appeared hand-polished and substantial. A game was already in progress, White's queen poised for attack. Gloria tilted her head. The position was precarious, someone had left themselves vulnerable. "You play." The voice came from behind her, calm, smooth and precise, like someone who commanded attention without needing to raise their tone. She turned to face a tall man in a cream sweater and perfectly pressed slacks. Charles Davenport mirrored his home, elegant, distant and a touch too flawless. "I used to," Gloria replied. He glanced at the board, then back at her, assessing something in her expression. "Care for a match?" Gloria smirked. "Sure, why not?" Latrice, entering with a stack of folded linens, nearly dropped them. "Mr. Davenport," she began, but he waved her off. "It's merely a game, Latrice." Gloria settled into the chair. "That's what they all say. But this wouldn't be just a game, and none of them knew it yet." The chair felt more comfortable than Gloria anticipated. Not soft, too upright for that, but firm in a way that signaled its expense. She adjusted her sleeves, surveyed the pieces and waited. Charles sat opposite her, his fingers carefully resting on the white bishop as if it were a delicate museum artifact. He studied the board, then met her gaze, measuring something in her face. "I'll play white," he stated, more a declaration than a question. Gloria didn't flinch. "Be my guest." Latrice lingered nearby, uncertain whether to remain or vanish. Charles, typically so private, was unpredictable on his best days. Witnessing her mother seated across from him at that gleaming table felt like observing a glass teetering on a counter's edge. Stable, but for how long? Charles made the first move. "Pawn to e4, Gloria murmured, mostly to herself. "Standard opening." "Do you have a preferred style?" he inquired, eyes still on the board. "I like to assess the situation before I label it style." Charles offered a faint smile, not mockery, perhaps amusement. He moved another piece, swift, clean, efficient. Gloria countered with her own. Bishop out, then knight. She didn't hurry, she'd seen too many play quickly to appear clever, only to collapse by move 10. He leaned back. "You're calm. It wouldn't make sense to play angry." Another move, another pause. "You know," Charles said, "my father taught me when I was 8. Thought chess would instill discipline, control, foresight." "Did it?" Gloria asked. "No," he replied, "but I got good enough to win a few country club tournaments." She smirked. "Ever play at Wequahic Park in Newark? That's where I learned. Boys from every part of town came with plastic boards and milk crates to sit on. Lost my first 10 games. Then I stopped losing." Charles moved a piece, then paused. "You're better than I thought." "That's 'cause you were thinking," she said. He raised an eyebrow. Gloria's voice softened. "You saw me walk in. Older lady, a little slow on the knees, cardigan over a church dress. You figured I'd entertain you for a few moves before you sent me back to the kitchen." Charles blinked just once. "Is that what you think of me?" "No, that's what you think of me." The room remained silent for a long moment. Then Charles let out something between a chuckle and a cough. "Fair enough. From the hallway, Latrice peeked in, lips pressed tightly. She was ready to intervene if things went awry, but the boards still lay between them and both were still playing. Charles adjusted his queen. "You're sharp, Mrs. Bennet. It's just Gloria, and sharpness ain't age-bound." The tempo quickened. Charles moved faster, attempting to disrupt her rhythm. Gloria remained slow, steady. She anticipated his traps before he finished setting them. He tried to corner her with a rook and queen. She slipped out with a knight and inverted his setup. He scratched his chin. "This is embarrassing." She tilted her head. "No, this is chess." Move after move, Charles began to breathe harder through his nose. Gloria's pieces steadily consumed the board, methodical, clean, as if she were wiping a counter, one square at a time. His bishop was gone, his right side rook trapped. She sacrificed a pawn to lure his king, and it worked. "Takes more than money and books to understand the board," she said softly, like a teacher gently correcting a student. He leaned back, brow furrowed, lips tight. "Check," she announced. He sighed. "I see it. One more move. Checkmate." Charles blinked twice, staring at the board as if he'd miscounted, but it was undeniable. His king had no escape. Latrice exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Charles slowly shook his head. "Impressive." Gloria folded her hands in her lap. "That's what happens when you've been playing the long game your whole life." He laughed genuinely this time. "Would you stay for a rematch after lunch?" "I got time," she said, gazing at the garden beyond the window. "Do you?" But time wasn't the only thing shifting in that house. Respect had entered the room and it wasn't leaving. Lunch was quiet, almost awkward. Charles offered roasted chicken, asparagus, and wild rice, neatly plated by the private chef who barely made eye contact. Latrice sat with them, mostly silent, observing her mother handle a cloth napkin as if she were back at a church banquet. Gloria wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply hungry. Charles, conversely, kept glancing at her, not rudely but curiously, as if still trying to comprehend how someone like her had just cleared the board. "I've never lost that fast," he finally said, spearing a piece of asparagus with more force than necessary. Gloria raised an eyebrow. "You will again if you play the same way." That nearly made Latrice choke on her water. Charles looked at her and smiled, not the tight, polite smile he gave guests but something looser. "You like telling the truth, don't you?" "Not always, but when someone asks for it, I figure they deserve it." He nodded thoughtfully, then turned his attention to the garden view. "This place belonged to my grandfather. He believed if a man wasn't good at chess, he wasn't good at life." Gloria wiped the corner of her mouth. "A lot of men mistake control for wisdom." That hung in the air long enough that even the birds outside seemed quieter. After lunch they returned to the sunroom, the same board freshly reset. Charles rolled his sleeves up slightly. Gloria sat just as comfortably as before, as if she belonged there, which in a way she now did. "I'll play black this time," he said. "Suit yourself." The first few moves passed quickly. Pawn, knight, bishop, standard. Charles was more focused now, attempting to shake off whatever surprise had caught him in the first match. He was observing her hands, tracking her eyes, second-guessing every piece she touched. "You're studying me," Gloria said without looking up. "Trying to read your rhythm." She placed her knight and glanced at him. "Chess ain't jazz. You don't read rhythm, you read patience." He grunted. "That's what I'm doing wrong then." By move 15, Charles had captured one of her rooks, but the cost was too high. He'd exposed his center and Gloria was quietly advancing her pawns like soldiers with a plan. Latrice, standing near the kitchen door, whispered to the butler, "He's trying too hard." The butler didn't respond, but he was watching too. Charles tried to corner her queen, advancing both bishops in a risky formation. Gloria took her time. She picked up a pawn, rolled it between her fingers, then placed it firmly down. The entire left side of the board was hers now. "You ever compete?" Charles asked, clearly attempting to stall. Gloria shook her head. "Didn't have time. Kids' work bills. But I used to play 3 games at once in the park on folding chairs. Win one, draw one, make the last guy cry." He let out a laugh, but it quickly faded. Her board control was increasing. He had fewer and fewer moves and he knew it. "I don't like this," he said. "What, losing again?" Gloria met his eyes. "It's just a game, remember?" He stared at her for a second, then nodded slowly. But by then it was too late. Another 3 moves and his king was trapped again, not surrounded with flair, but pinned in a way that felt personal, quiet, inescapable. "Checkmate," she said. Charles leaned back. This time there was no denial, no searching the board for a missed path. He just sat there, the corners of his mouth turning slightly upward. "You're something else, Gloria." She stood up slowly, stretching her back. "I'm just someone who knows how to think ahead." But Charles wasn't just losing chess matches. He was beginning to shed the version of reality he'd constructed around himself. The sun had shifted by the time Charles reset the board. The golden light from the windows now spilled across the tiles at an angle, casting long shadows over the squares. But Gloria didn't rush. She sat with the same quiet presence, smoothing her skirt as she settled back into the chair. "Third time's the charm?" she asked, voice steady. Charles chuckled, but there was a faint flicker of frustration behind his eyes. He wasn't accustomed to being on the defensive. Not at work, not in life, and certainly not in his own home. "I need to prove I'm not completely hopeless," he said, placing the pieces with a little more force than necessary. "Latrice, bring us some coffee, would you?" Latrice hesitated. "Of course, sir." As she left the room, her eyes met her mother's. Gloria gave her the tiniest shake of her head, just enough to say, "Don't worry, I'm fine." This time Charles adopted a different approach. He played aggressively early, pushing his pawns forward, forcing confrontations in the center of the board. Gloria adjusted, not with panic but with the kind of cool adaptability that comes from enduring harder things than a bishop's advance. "You ever play speed chess?" he asked, eyes locked on the board. "In the park. Time's all you got, but that doesn't mean you should waste it." He tried to corner her knight, she trapped his queen's bishop instead. Charles leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You really don't let up, do you?" Gloria's voice was soft. "You learn that when life don't give you second chances." Latrice returned with 2 cups of coffee. Charles didn't even glance up. Gloria, on the other hand, gave her daughter a gentle thank you, and took a sip as if it were part of her strategy. Charles moved too fast, lost a knight, tried to recover with a long castle, but Gloria was already pushing her pawns on the far side. She wasn't just defending, she was setting the tone, steering the entire game toward her rhythm. "You're quiet when you play," Charles muttered. "I think out loud in my head." He smiled faintly. "That's a contradiction. So's being rich and bored." He blinked, clearly not expecting that. Gloria didn't smile, didn't wink, just placed a rook neatly right where it needed to be. "I'm not bored," he said after a moment. "No," she replied, sipping her coffee again. "Then why'd you ask a stranger to play chess?" That landed harder than either of them expected. The silence stretched. Charles looked down at the board. His king was boxed in again, his rook cornered, his knight irrelevant. "You've got control of the board," he admitted. She looked at him, no triumph in her eyes. "It's not about control. It's about knowing when to move and when to wait." Charles stared at her. "You could have been a grandmaster." "I could have been a lot of things," she said. Latrice lingered in the hallway, listening. She'd never heard her mother talk like this before. Not guarded, not polite for the sake of fitting in, but honest, direct, and somehow still gracious. "Checkmate," Gloria said again softly. Charles didn't argue. He looked at the pieces, then slowly leaned back in his chair, letting out a long breath. "How'd you learn to play like that?" he asked. Gloria looked past him as if watching a memory drift across the window. "Years ago my husband used to work nights. After the kids went to bed, I'd sit at the kitchen table with an old chess book and a board from Goodwill. I'd play both sides until I saw something new. Sometimes I'd play until the sun came up." Charles watched her like he'd never truly seen her before. "You did that alone?" "Most things, yes." He sat still, almost uncomfortable with the weight of that sentence. But before either of them could say more, Latrice stepped forward, and what she said next would shift the balance once again. Latrice stepped forward slowly, clutching the linen towel she had been nervously twisting in her hands. "Mr. Davenport," she said cautiously, "my mother needs to rest. She's been on a train since this morning and hasn't even put her bag down properly." Gloria shot her a look, not sharp, just calm and clear. "I'm fine, baby. He just needs someone to challenge him, that's all." Charles stood up from the chess table and turned toward Latrice. "She's right, you know. I do need the challenge." His tone wasn't defensive. If anything, it sounded like something had cracked open a little inside him. I spend too much time with people who tell me I'm right, even when I know I'm wrong. Latrice didn't answer. She looked tired of balancing her job and her mother, of trying to manage the space between worlds that were never meant to meet. I'm just saying, she added quietly, this isn't the kind of place people are usually invited to play chess and talk over coffee, especially not people like my mother. That hung in the air like a heavy curtain. Charles looked at her and for once, there was no polite detachment in his eyes. And maybe that's the problem. He turned back to Gloria. Would you consider joining me for lunch tomorrow? Just lunch, no chess unless you feel like it. I'd enjoy the company. Gloria studied him, not the offer but the man, his posture, his voice, the way he kept glancing away like he wasn't used to asking for anything. She didn't answer right away. Is this about chess? She asked. Or are you trying to fix something inside yourself? Charles looked surprised by the question but he didn't avoid it. Maybe both. Gloria nodded slowly, giving neither a yes nor a no, just taking him in like she had all the time in the world. Later that evening, back in the small guest room Latrice had prepared, Gloria sat on the edge of the bed and removed her shoes. Her feet ached, her hip was stiff, but something about that game, those games, had awakened an old, forgotten part of her. Latrice came in, still wearing her work shoes, and sat beside her. You sure you're okay? She asked quietly. Gloria smiled without looking at her. I'm tired, not dead. They both laughed, but the laughter faded fast. Latrice hesitated. I've worked for that man for 4 years and he's never said more than 10 words to me in a day. Now you come in and suddenly he's all chatty and reflective. Makes me wonder. Wonder what? If I'm not doing enough or if maybe I'm not seen the way you are. Gloria turned and took her daughter's hand. Baby, the way you carry yourself every day, the things you hold together all by yourself. That man couldn't do half of what you do. Latrice blinked away tears she didn't expect. It's just strange, Mom, seeing you in his house like that. Like you belong there more than I ever have. Gloria leaned back, the mattress creaking slightly beneath her. I didn't belong there. I just didn't ask for permission. The next morning, Charles was waiting at the bottom of the stairs with 2 cups of coffee, one black, one with just the right amount of milk. Gloria blinked at the sight of him. Figured you might want to sit out in the garden today. No games, just a bench and some peace. She raised an eyebrow. You following me around now? Maybe I'm just interested in where the next checkmate comes from. But what neither of them expected was how the next conversation, out in the quiet of that garden, would begin to reveal the truths they'd both been avoiding. The garden smelled faintly of rosemary and fresh grass. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't silent either. Birds chirped, a breeze rustled the leaves, and somewhere out of sight a sprinkler hissed. Charles led Gloria to a wooden bench near a stone fountain. The water flowed slowly as if it had nowhere else to be. Gloria took her coffee, sat down and looked around. This is a good place to think. That's what I come out here for, Charles said, easing into the other side of the bench. Most people don't know what to do with silence. She sipped her drink. Most people are afraid of it. They sat in that same silence for a minute or two, not awkward, not forced, just still. Charles cleared his throat. I've been alone in this house for almost 7 years now. My wife passed away, complications from surgery. It was supposed to be routine. Gloria looked over at him, not with pity but with understanding. I lost my husband to a stroke, she said. He was making coffee in the kitchen, dropped the mug, and by the time I got there he was already gone. Charles blinked slowly. That final. The wind tugged at the leaves. The fountain kept pouring. Neither one of them tried to fill the silence right away. I stayed busy after she died, Charles finally said. I buried myself in estate work, fundraisers, people who wanted something from me. But there was always a gap, a space I didn't know how to fill. Gloria nodded. Grief's like a locked drawer. You can't force it open, but you know it's there. You hear it every time the floor creaks. He looked at her like she'd just articulated something he hadn't known how to express. You ever think about marrying again? He asked. Gloria chuckled. At my age, I just want peace and decent shoes and maybe a good book now and then. Charles smiled genuinely. Fair. She turned slightly toward him. You ever wonder if the version of yourself people see isn't the full picture? Every day. I spent years being Latrice's mama, or the quiet lady who helps with Sunday school. But I was also a woman who played chess on milk crates and corrected lawyers on their openings in the park. He laughed. I'd pay to see that. You already did, she teased. He leaned back and stared at the sky. You know, the funny thing is, you walked in here just to visit your daughter, and somehow I feel like you've done more for this house in 2 days than I have in 2 years. Gloria looked him dead in the eye. That's because I'm not performing for it. He sat up, eyes narrowing, not offended, just thoughtful. You trying to teach me something? Only if you're ready to learn. They both smiled. From the other side of the hedges, Latrice watched through the window. She could see them clearly, two people who didn't belong on paper finding common ground on a garden bench like old friends. You see them, the butler said quietly from behind her. Latrice jumped. Yeah, I see them. Man's been quieter than usual lately. Might be good for him. Latrice didn't answer. She had too many thoughts and no safe place to put them. Back outside, Charles gestured toward the chessboard, still sitting in the sunroom. You think I'll ever beat you? Not if you keep playing the person you think I am. He nodded slowly, letting that settle. They sat there until the sun moved beyond the hedges and the air cooled just enough to remind them the day was drifting away. But Charles wasn't the only one being changed by those moments. Latrice was beginning to wrestle with a truth of her own, one she hadn't said out loud yet. By midweek, the house felt subtly different. It wasn't loud and no one said anything directly, but there were lingering glances, quick stops in conversation when Gloria entered a room. The kitchen staff, the groundskeepers, even Mrs. Pennington, the estate manager who only spoke in clipped phrases, had started to treat Gloria with a kind of tight politeness, respectful on the surface, dismissive underneath. Latrice noticed it first. It was in the way people smiled at her mother without making eye contact, the way conversations grew thinner around her, and most of all, it was in how the tone shifted when the estate's usual visitors arrived. Thursday afternoon brought one of those visitors. Elise Van Dorn, a family friend whose name appeared on museum plaques and donor walls, pulled up in a silver Jaguar. She wore a tailored beige suit and a scarf that looked like it had never touched a speck of dust. Charles greeted her with a soft hug on the front steps. Gloria, seated near the window in the sunroom, sipped tea and kept her eyes on the chessboard in front of her. Latrice dusted the bookshelves behind her mother, every movement precise, deliberate, and quiet. You sure about this? Latrice asked under her breath. Gloria didn't look up. Sure about what? Being in plain sight like this. Gloria's voice was calm. If I played in the park with sirens going off behind me, I can sit here with a silk scarf watching. Inside, Charles led Elise into the sitting room. Gloria could hear the light laughter, the click of high heels on the hardwood floor. She's quite the surprise, isn't she? Elise said, just loud enough for the staff nearby to hear. Who? Charles asked. Your guest. The chess master in pearls. Very unconventional. Charles paused. She's better than I am. Oh, I'm sure. I just never thought I'd see the day you'd spend your afternoons with with someone from a different sort of background. There it was, soft, dressed up and dipped in sugar, but the blade still cut. Charles didn't respond right away. Then he said, Gloria's got more depth than anyone I've had lunch with in years. You might learn something if you sat with her. Elise let out a faint laugh, the kind people use when they don't know how else to respond. Back in the sunroom, Gloria looked at her daughter. Someone judging me? Latrice's voice was tight. Maybe. Gloria turned a pawn in her hand, thoughtful. Then they're wasting their time. I've lived long enough to know judgment doesn't pay the bills or raise a child. Latrice crouched to pick up a coaster from under the table. You shouldn't have to prove anything. I'm not. I'm just being seen for once, and some folks don't like that. Later that day, while walking the garden path, Charles caught up with Gloria. He looked uncomfortable in his own yard, hands in his pockets, unsure of his footing. Elise didn't mean anything by it, he said after a long pause. I know exactly what she meant, Gloria replied without breaking stride. Charles sighed. I didn't know what to say. You said what you could. That's something. He looked down at the grass. People in my world, they have a way of making you pick a side without ever saying it out loud. Gloria stopped walking. Then maybe it's time you stop picking sides and start standing on your own 2 feet. He looked at her, surprised again by how direct she was. I'm not a project, Charles, she said. I'm not a cause or an experiment or your afternoon distraction. I'm a person who knows how to think 4 moves ahead, and I saw this coming. Charles nodded. I deserved that. Gloria gave him a long look. Not everything is about you deserving or not. Sometimes people just need to be told the truth. But the truth had a way of making people uncomfortable, and Gloria was about to find out who could really handle it. The dinner was supposed to be small, just a few people from Charles's inner circle. Estate donors, a local judge, Elise Van Dorn, and a man named Dr. Lionel Stratford, a retired Yale professor with a love for cigars and his own voice. Gloria had no intention of attending. She told Latrice she'd rather stay in her room with a book and her slippers. But Charles insisted, politely but firmly. I'd like you there, he said that morning. It's not just a dinner, it's something different this time. She agreed reluctantly, not for the company, but because she wanted to see what he meant by different. The dining room was long, with a table that could seat 20 but only held 8 that night. Candles flickered, silverware gleamed, the food was plated like artwork. Gloria wore a navy blue sweater over her dress. She refused the stylist Charles offered earlier. I clean up fine, she'd said, and she did. Dinner started quietly enough. Charles sat at the head, Gloria on his left, Elise on his right. The others spread down the sides like ornaments. Wine flowed, polite conversation drifted. It was Dr. Stratford who broke the surface. So Charles, he said, voice round and self-assured, I've heard the rumors. You've got a new secret weapon on the chessboard. Latrice, serving from the sideboard, froze. Charles smiled. No secret, just someone who plays better than I do. Stratford looked at Gloria, eyebrow raised. And may I ask where you studied? Gloria didn't blink. In my kitchen on a 50-cent board from the Goodwill store. A few smiles around the table grew tight. Elise reached for her wine. Stratford chuckled as if he hadn't heard her. But surely you've competed at some point? A woman of such skill, someone must have discovered you by now. Gloria kept her eyes on him. Discovery is a funny word. People like you only find what you're already looking for. Charles shifted in his seat. The room felt smaller. Stratford tilted his head, trying again. It's just unusual, that's all. Someone with your background playing at such a high level. Impressive, really. The air changed, not dramatically but enough that you could feel the tension settle like dust on a glass surface. Gloria put her fork down. My background is 40 years of working, raising kids, losing a husband, and keeping my dignity when folks acted like I was invisible. That's where I come from. You impressed by that? Stratford blinked. Well, I didn't mean. Yes, you did, she said. You meant to say I didn't belong at this table, and I'm just letting you know I didn't ask to be here. I was invited. Elise cleared her throat. Let's not get carried away. Lionel was just being curious. No, Charles interrupted, voice calm but hard. He was being condescending. Everyone went quiet. Charles turned to Gloria. I'm sorry. Gloria shook her head. Don't apologize for him. Let people show you who they are. Stratford pushed his chair back slightly. I think I've overstayed my welcome. No, Gloria replied, standing up slowly. I think I've reached the end of my patience. She stepped back from the table. Latrice was already at her side, a hand on her shoulder. You sure? Latrice whispered. I'm done entertaining for free, Gloria said under her breath. She left the room calmly, no dramatics, no slamming doors, just grace. The kind that unsettles people more than shouting ever could. Charles stayed seated, his eyes lingering on the empty chair beside him. Later that night, after everyone had gone and the lights were dimmed, Charles knocked on the guest room door. Gloria opened it halfway. I didn't expect that, he said. People rarely do. He hesitated. You were right. I sat there and let him talk like that. You sat there and learned something, she replied. That's a start. Charles lowered his head. I'm not sure I belong in your world either. She smiled. Maybe the point is neither of us have to ask permission anymore. But Gloria wasn't just walking away from a table. She was setting one of her own, and someone unexpected was about to sit down. Saturday morning arrived with a clear sky and that subtle scent of early dew still clinging to the grass. Gloria sat in the garden alone, wearing her husband's old windbreaker and a pair of faded walking shoes. A chessboard rested in front of her on a small stone table, pieces mid-game, white's bishop threatening black's rook. She wasn't playing anyone, just running scenarios, testing outcomes. The breeze felt good on her face. Latrice came out quietly with a tray of fruit and toast. She set it down beside her mother and sat on the edge of the bench. "You not going back inside?" she asked. Gloria didn't look up. "No. I'm tired of rooms with long tables and short minds." Latrice smirked, even though she was still worried. "He hasn't stopped pacing since you left the dinner. He needed that walk." Just then Charles stepped into the garden, but this time not alone. A young woman trailed behind him, tall, about 16, with short braids and sharp eyes that didn't dart or shift. She wore a hoodie and jeans. Her hands were tucked deep into her pockets. "Gloria," Charles said, "this is Camille. She's from Bridgeport. Her mum works at the community center. She's been playing chess online for 2 years, but she's never had anyone to mentor her." Gloria looked at the girl, then at Charles. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to fund something. Not some shiny charity with a gala and handshakes. I want you to run a program here on the estate or nearby. I'll back it. Chess, strategy, life, whatever you see fit." Gloria looked at Camille. The girl stared at the board, then at Gloria. "You any good?" Gloria asked her. Camille shrugged. "I don't lose a lot." Gloria smiled. "That's not the same as being good." Camille tilted her head. "You gonna teach me or not?" Gloria looked up at Charles. "Why me?" "Because I've seen what happens when you sit at a table. People change. They listen or they get uncomfortable. Either way they grow." She looked back at Camille. "You got a ride home, baby? My mom's picking me up at 2. Then sit down. Let's see what you know." Camille slid into the chair across from her. Latrice folded her arms and watched with a small smile. Charles lingered a few steps behind but didn't speak, just listened. They played quietly at first. Camille opened with a familiar pattern. Gloria tested her, not to win, just to see how the girl thought. She noticed Camille's tendency to sacrifice early, bold but reckless. "You're impatient," Gloria said. Camille frowned. "No, I just don't like wasting time." "That's the same thing." They played again and again. By the third round, Camille had stopped trying to impress. She listened more, adjusted, asked questions. After an hour, Gloria stood up slowly, knees cracking. "You'll be great, but only if you start treating this game like a mirror, not a hammer." Camille blinked. "What does that mean?" "You want to beat people. I want to know people. That's the difference." Charles walked over slowly, hands in his pockets. "She's brilliant," he said, nodding at Camille. "She's got potential," Gloria corrected. Then she turned to Charles. "You really serious about this program?" "I've already spoken to the zoning board. The old library space on Broad Street is available. Needs some repairs. I'll handle that. You handle the kids." Gloria sat back down on the bench. She didn't smile, she just looked at the board, then at Camille. "What's in it for you?" Charles took a second. "Peace." Gloria nodded. "Then don't micromanage me." "I wouldn't dare." Latrice took a few steps forward. "Mama, are you actually doing this?" Gloria looked at her daughter, her eyes soft but sharp. "I think I already did." But this wasn't just a program starting. This was a door opening, and Gloria had the keys for the next generation waiting just outside. 3 months later, the old library on Broad Street didn't look like much from the outside. The brick was still chipped in places, and the original sign hung a little crooked. But the inside, that was different. Gone were the dusty shelves and cracked tile floors. In their place, warm lighting, sturdy tables, and 20 matching chessboards lined up like soldiers in formation. Posters lined the walls, some showing famous grandmasters, others with Gloria's handwritten notes. "Think ahead. Think beyond. Think better." On that Monday afternoon, the room was full. Teenagers from Bridgeport, Norwalk, and New Haven leaned over boards, their brows furrowed. Some whispered moves. Others sat in silence, deep in concentration. And in the corner, as always, sat Gloria Bennett. She wore her gray cardigan and the same watch her husband gave her 30 years ago. Her voice never rose. Her presence said everything she needed. Across from her sat Camille, still bold but sharper now, more deliberate. She'd stopped rushing her plays and started building plans. Gloria watched her with quiet pride. "You think you can beat me today?" Gloria asked. Camille smirked. "I know I can." "That's your first mistake." They both laughed, but then the game got serious. Around them, students peeked over shoulders. Camille's peers respected her now not because she was loud but because she learned, because she adapted. Charles visited once a week, never in a suit, always with a box of pastries and a check quietly handed to Latrice, who now managed the books and payroll. "You're doing more than I ever did with this place," he said during one of his visits. Gloria, sipping lukewarm tea from a chipped mug, replied, "That's 'cause you were waiting for the right time. I decided to stop waiting." He nodded. "There's a line outside most days. Words spreading." "It should," she said. "Kids want someone to see how their minds work, not just where they came from." Latrice watched from the doorway, smiling quietly to herself. She'd taken to arriving early each morning, checking supplies, organizing schedules, and watching her mother thrive in a way she'd never seen before. "I'm still your boss in this building," Gloria would tease. "And I'm still the one who fixes the printer," Latrice always shot back. The space had become more than just a chess room. It became a community. Students stayed after games to talk about their lives, their struggles, their ideas. One boy named Tristan started writing poems between games. A girl named Joy helped fix a broken light fixture and now wanted to study engineering. None of that was in Gloria's original plan, because she hadn't had one. She had just shown up and kept showing up. One Thursday afternoon, Camille stood before the room, holding a small trophy. She'd just won a regional tournament in Stamford, first place. Her mother was in the back, beaming. Gloria called for attention. "Camille's not just a strong player," she said, her voice calm but strong. "She's someone who listened when it mattered. That's what wins games. That's what builds life." The room clapped. Camille wiped her face with her sleeve and sat back down, speechless for once. Later that evening, when the students had left and the lights were dimmed, Gloria sat alone at the main table, resetting the pieces one last time. Charles approached her slowly. "You look tired," he said. "I feel proud." He placed a folder beside her. Inside were papers. Foundation status approval, funding plans for expansion, even letters from community leaders. "You built something, Gloria, and people want more of it." She closed the folder. "Then I'll need more chairs." They sat in silence for a while, two people who never expected their lives to tangle but had stopped trying to make sense of it. "You ever think about what it means to leave a mark?" Charles asked. Gloria leaned back. "Only if it's not about the mark. Only if it's about what grows from it." He smiled. "You should write that down." "I just did," she said, tapping her temple. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. Kids walked by with backpacks and takeout containers. Life moved like it always did. But inside that building, a new rhythm had taken hold, slow, steady, deliberate, like a chess game played by someone who understood patience and knew exactly when to move. Gloria never wanted recognition, she wanted impact. And somehow, with a borrowed board and an open door, she'd managed both. If this story meant something to you, share it. Stories like Gloria's happen every day. They just don't always make it into rooms that matter. Maybe you know someone like her. Maybe you are someone like her. Don't wait for an invitation. Sit down and play.